Well, the road to the Derby is getting close to the end. We've got three 100-point to the winner races coming up. They were all supposed to be on Saturday, but the Bluegrass, it got moved to Tuesday. Still the Santa Anita Derby, Wood Memorial on Saturday. Lots of Keeneland up until the Bluegrass. So we'll get some extended fun on the road to the Derby this week. Three big races. Money back special offer to add to it. Let's get to it this week on Horse Sense. Bailey and I.
Welcome back to another edition of Horse Sense. As always, I'm Bailey Armour, joined alongside amateur weatherman Scott Shapiro as we head into another big weekend of racing affected by some weather all across the country. I know I've got my rain jacket on in preparation for these crazy storms we're getting here in Kentucky. We already got like 2 inches of rain overnight. Everything at my farm is underwater pretty much, which means Keeneland had to move their opening weekend of racing from tomorrow on Friday all the way to Sunday is now scheduled opening day. Monday is another card, and then the Bluegrass is going to be run on Tuesday. So 8 straight days of weekend racing at Keeneland. Well, not just weekend, but a full week of racing at Keeneland. Personally, I'm pretty excited for that, Scott. How about you?
Yeah, no, I think in terms of my life and maybe yours as well, it sounds like, and those that, can play, I think it worked out great. For me, as much as anything, obviously the horse's safety first and foremost. But other than that, we're going to get a potential of running this over a racetrack that isn't a quagmire. I don't think that would have told us much about the Bluegrass. Forget about all the other races. But I like to know what these Derby horses are doing more than running over something that maybe they'll run over the first Saturday in May. But yeah, it definitely makes for a long extended weekend with some good races. Obviously, we got the Wood Memorial, which we won't get to on this Horse Sense, but we've got our big Santa Anita Derby out west, and then we get the Bluegrass after a couple of days. But we also have a lot of great promotions to go along with Santa Anita Derby and just the spring in general, right?
Absolutely. They say that April showers bring May flowers, but they definitely brought the promotions this weekend. So, as usual, we're continuing our $10 Triple Crown Trail money back special promotion. So that'll be on the Santa Anita Derby and the Wood Memorial this Saturday. And then that will continue to Tuesday for the rescheduled Bluegrass. So don't you worry about that. We've got you covered. In addition to that, we are doing a 5 million first rewards point hit and split on the Santa Anita Derby card this Saturday. We'll talk a little bit about that as we get into Horse Sense, but that'll be split up across 3 separate pools. And then in addition to that, we also are doing a bet 100 get $10 offer on the Dubai World Cup card, which I believe starts pretty early in the morning on Saturday, 7:30 after the adjusted post times. If I'm correct, I know they had some heat warnings. Yeah, 7:30 Eastern, because they're running like a night card basically because it's supposed to get so hot. So weather is inescapable no matter where you go. But make sure you do go to the promotions tab on the Xpressbet website for a full list.
Yes, and we had the Florida Derby Challenge last weekend, and congrats to all those that made big scores. And that we've got the $1,500 Santa Anita Derby Challenge this week to obviously celebrate the Santa Anita Derby. And as you mentioned, we'll talk a little bit more in the next segment about Santa Anita and the Derby. But yeah, I mean, there are some very challenging races towards the back end of that card that are going to lead someone to pure joy in winning that contest, obviously. But should be a lot of fun. And then I'm going to have another Spaces this weekend, even with the Keeneland car moving to Tuesday. We'll talk a little bit about the Bluegrass and maybe a couple of the big races, but we're going to talk about the Santa Anita Derby and Wood Memorial card. It'll be myself and the Paddock Prince, the coach himself, David Levitch, will be back on for the second time. So looking forward to that. That'll start at 9 a.m. Well, the Santa Anita Derby, Bailey, has the horse that I would say is the consensus overall top choice for the Derby, at least heading into these big races in the early part of May, and that's Journalism. And he earned it. He's won 3 in a row, but coming off the layoff for Michael McCarthy, maybe you thought he wasn't going to be at his best, but he was really impressive running down Barnes. Barnes really didn't stop in that race. If you look at the numbers and kind of watch things, it was more Journalism going and getting him. Well, Barnes will have another crack at him along with his stablemate, 4 for 5, Citizen Bull, quite the resume. And then you've got a pair of John Sheriff's runners, Biza, who fits a little bit better, and then Westwood here, who would be very happy, I'm sure, to pick up third, even if it's a well-beaten third. But curious how you see this. I know you're not against journalism at this point, but maybe not as high as on him as I am.
Yeah, I know we've talked about him before heading into some of these earlier West Coast preps, and I know you're pretty keen on him, and I won't say that he's a bad horse. I think that's a really good way to put it, that he really caught Barnes last time out rather than Barnes just stopping. And when we talked about it in our recap of that, I think I said something about Barnes basically just like getting hung up and then finally got nabbed there at the end. And that's exactly what happened. And it very well might happen again this weekend. That recent workout that we saw of Barnes, which I believe was on Monday, where they put him with the unraced maiden filly Nima on First TV. Please go check out that workout if you haven't. We'll see if we can put a clip in here. They start Barnes like way behind her. She comes out to let him have the rail spot. So very much a planned work. And then in my research for today's show, I found a DRF article about that where Bob says, if I'm going to get an extra eighth out of him, and he can't be pedal to the metal, which gives me pause a little bit. Like maybe Bob isn't totally sure that he can get that extra, extra time out of him. So honestly, journalism could show us again the horse that he has shown us to be before, in that, yeah, he doesn't care if other horses basically stop. He can just catch on right by and pick it up at the end there. I think Citizen Bull and journalism obviously don't need the Derby points that Barnes does, because Barnes has to run first or second here to get into the Kentucky Derby with the amount of points that he has so far. Bazar or Westwood, of course, looking to pick up any points at all. I'm going to take a stab with Barnes and see if he can maybe continue that with the blinkers back on after that work, but I definitely wouldn't talk you off journalism at all.
Well, I mean, we have I'm not against Barnes either. I'm more against Citizen Bull in terms of wagering. I just think he's had things easy. It'll be interesting to see which of them gets aggressively ridden out of the gate and which one doesn't. Both of them, it seems like Bob is kind of trying to relax a little more in the mornings than they have been in the afternoons before this start. But we talked about the hit it, split it promotions that we added to the mix for the Santa Anita Derby Day. There's going to be an early one, a middle one, and a late one. I believe the late one is going to be 2 million points. Is that right?
Yes, so that'll be 2 million on the early, which begins in race 1, 1 million on the middle pick 4, which I believe begins in race number 6. It'll be on the Xpressbet website, of course. And then another 2 million on the late pick 5, which begins in race number 8, and then has the Santa Anita Derby in the middle. You've got some maiden races before and some other races afterwards. So there's definitely some opportunity to kind of build your ticket around this promotion. Truthfully, what tips do you have for me here? Because this is kind of a hard one for me.
Yeah, there's a lot of tough races surrounding the Santa Anita Derby. There's a couple of open company races towards the tail end. I think they might both be on the turf. I looked at it this morning, and then haven't made final selections yet necessarily. But then there's a couple of maiden races, and all of them appear a lot more wide open than this race, where, let's be honest, I mean, I guess there's going to be some people that think Biza, who was impressive last time, but it would be a big step up for him. But it would be pretty surprising if journalism, Citizen Bull, or Barnes did not win this race. I think most would agree. I'm not saying anything crazy there. In terms of the sequence, obviously, as always, it depends on your other opinions, but I see cases for long shots in a few of those races, if not more. So taking a stand in this race is what I would advise, unless you'd like one of the Sheriff's runners. If you like Barnes, single him, I mean, or at least on one of your tickets, take that stand, because I don't think a lot of people will. I tend to think he's going to get a slight bit overlooked. I did a poll on Twitter 2 weeks ago, and I just found it very interesting. It was not a huge sample size, 150, 200 people answered. But I found it interesting how few people are still into Barnes of the Baffert runners compared to Citizen Bull, or it was Cornucopian at the time. And I just found that striking. And I wonder if the public is going to, if it's going to be, kind of what we see in this spot. So I think singling Barnes from a game theory perspective is a very, very savvy move here. Personally, the way I'm going to attack it, I'm going to single journalism on the majority of my tickets, but I am going to include Barnes as kind of a B. I definitely think there's a scenario where I mean, let's remember that was his first start off a couple of months layoff, but most importantly, it was his first time ever traveling 2 turns. So I totally see the case for Barnes. And if journalism's 3 or 4 to 5 and Barnes is 4 to 1, he's the better play, in my opinion, especially when you're talking about the money back special offer, which we mentioned earlier on in the show.
It's a lot of rewards points, and a lot of rewards points like that can definitely take you far. I know that you have played in some of the ones that we've done this year and done pretty well in them. So I think it's a really nice promotion. Personally, I love playing in them. And I think it's good practice to continue to build these pick 4 and pick 5 tickets, especially when you have something like a lot of these rewards points on the line.
Well, Bailey, we're moving the Bluegrass Stakes back from Saturday to Tuesday, as you've already mentioned. But I think it's good. Maybe the track will still have some precipitation in it. And when I say good, obviously it's good for, people not to be in the rain of the horses to have that. But I just mean in terms of the quality of this race and kind of being able to take away from horses that we don't know that much about still, as we want to kind of propel towards next month. This is a pretty big race in its own right, though. And while I don't think there's any chance, barring injury, that the winner of this race is the favorite in the Derby, I think there's a decent chance that the top 2 finishers here, if they both run well, and maybe even 3, could be amongst the top 5 or 6 horses. There's a world that might happen. And, we were talking about it before we got on camera. And this is a race where, the morning line kind of tells you it, but there's 4 or 5 horses that just all kind of, I think there's 5 really. Rendered Judgment and Admiral Dennis are the 2 that are kind of the outsiders. You could easily make the case for the other 5, and it's almost difficult to figure out who will be favored. How are you sorting things out?
Yeah, this is definitely a little murkier of a picture here than a race maybe like the Santa Anita Derby, where I have a much stronger opinion. I think you're right that there are probably 4 or 5 in here that could just as easily take it from each other. And then, of course, you've got your longer shots as well. I narrowed it down. If I had to pick just one, which, that's how sometimes a win bet works. If I had to pick just one, it's the number 4, Owen Almighty for me. So this is Brian Lynch. Jockey changed to Jose Ortiz, who broke his maiden with him. I would say I am warmer than lukewarm on him, but still would like your opinion on this field here. Comes into the Bluegrass, which has historically been my favorite Derby prep, not just because it's in, not my backyard, but close to it. But I really like going to this race at Keeneland, especially because I feel like I can really get an accurate sense of the horses before the Derby, which is definitely a nice perk. And we'll see if we get over there on Tuesday if the rain finally stops. Anyway, horse has a jockey switch to Jose Ortiz, like I mentioned, who helped him break his maiden at Churchill. Irad, his regular rider, goes to the number 1 River Thames, who I think is another big threat, especially when it comes to speed horses. When I'm looking at a horse like this, the ultimate deciding factor for me was his Tomlinson rating on the pedigree for a wet or off track, because we have no idea what the weather's going to do. And I think that adds another wrench to the plans. So for me, I'm going to take Owen Almighty, pick it apart.
Well, I mean, it's hard to be super against Owen Almighty. He's been so good. I mean, I remember when this horse debuted. I don't remember. I mean, there's been others, but I don't remember a Brian Lynch horse being talked up as much as an early 2-year-old as this one. And he ran huge on debut, and he's really done very little wrong since. He obviously was taken down in kind of a decision in the Pasco, and he finished second to Jonathan's Way in the Iroquois. But the thing about him, if I'm trying to talk anyone off, I think there's a couple of really hurdles that he has to legitimately overcome in this race. One, he's coming back quick. I mean, and it's his 4th start of the form cycle. Ideally you would like him to peak on his 3rd start. Maybe we saw that. And then you have the question of the distance. He proved he could get the distance of a mile and a 16th at Tampa with an easy lead, right? Things went his way that day for a couple of different reasons. Maybe that'll happen again, but I don't see it, very likely, because he has East Avenue to his outside with the blinkers going on. When this horse hasn't been on the lead, he's been a total dud. I mean, their plan has to be, you would think, for this horse to break well and go. And then you've got, yeah, right. And then you've got River Thames on the rail, who's his Jose, who Irad opts for. I think that might be more of a Todd Pletcher than the horse decision, but those are the three likely speeds in here. And Owen Almighty draws in between them. He's got a different rider. He's got the blinkers on again. He's never really relaxed with them. So I think this is a really talented horse, but I've got questions about the extra furlong, especially if he's not going to be loose on the lead. And then you have to answer the question of like, well, is he even trying to win this race? They have the points, right? So
yeah, I mean, it's not like they need the full
they need to
benefit.
just get a race in them, because what's happened with the Tampa Bay Derby is it's proven through history to be tough to have a horse ready off that long of a layoff and perform well in the Kentucky Derby. And they weren't expecting to run in it. So it's kind of a tricky spot.
Is this going to be their like last chance to kind of see what kind of racehorse he's going to be on the first Saturday in May then by running in this spot if they're already qualified?
I think they've kind of committed to the Derby, it seems to me, because it's the owner. When the owner wants to be in the Derby, it's tough. They spend $350K on the horse, like
not committed to as in are they going to go, but like a clearer picture of what kind of horse they're going to have instead of coming off this big layoff.
Absolutely. I thought you might be referencing, well, if he tires and runs poorly, maybe they'll shift to the Pat Day Mile. Well, there's a world where they don't run at all in the Derby. I guess there's a world where that happens, but unlikely. I do think we're going to get a much clearer picture, assuming these jocks ride the race like it looks like on paper, and someone doesn't make another easy early lead, because it didn't look like Owen Almighty was going to have an easy lead in the Tampa Bay Derby. That would be the caveat, because there's no way anybody's having an easy early lead in any Derby. But if you look at this year's Derby, specifically this one, there's going to be some speed in there.
Now, before we close, I want to give you a suggested price horse for underneath. Did you see the replay of Admiral Dennis's? Well, I mean, of course, we've all seen the Rebel, but like, have you gone back and watched the replay of the Rebel, looking at Admiral Dennis specifically, who's the far outside horse in the Bluegrass?
I have, and he had a terrible trip. Obviously, was off slow. It was ridiculous. My problem with him is the previous races before. This is a horse I was very high on as a 2-year-old, thinking he was going to be coming into the Derby picture as a 3-year-old. In fact, I drafted him on my fantasy Derby team. But the races, the gun runner was really underwhelming. And the fact that they raced in the first level allowance at 1-2 the day, either after or before the Lecomte, that was when I was, and with Lasix, that was when I got a little bit leery on what Brad thought of him. That said, the price is going to be there. And if he gets out of the gate, what are you doing? Thinking of using him underneath kind of more?
Yeah, underneath in like some tries. I don't know if he can quite finish in the exacta just based on some of the caliber of these inside horses. And we know that inside speed historically has been a big play at Keeneland. I mean, who knows with the spring lead and weather changes and things. Not always. But I think he just forgot he was supposed to be a racehorse that day in the Rebel, because he really did not break at all. It wasn't even in frame, and then finally comes to close for 6th. But could we see him close for 3rd? Hopefully to give you some money and not 4th. That would aggravate me, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with him is it's interesting with Louis Saez, the guy that's known for getting the horses out of the gate. You would think, same with Giroux, though. He's pretty good. I mean, he misses a lot more than Louis. But point being, you would think the goal would be to try to get him out of the gate and into the race more, but maybe a half step slow might work to his benefit if the pace is honest. I think it'll be difficult for him if he wants to be up and on the pace to hang around, because to your point, he could get caught wide.
As always, thank you so much for watching another episode of Horse Sense. I'm Bailey Armour and was joined today by amateur weatherman Scott Shapiro as we covered all things Santa Anita Derby and the Bluegrass Stakes up at Keeneland next Tuesday instead of this Saturday like originally planned. Let us know in the comments who your pick is for these key Derby preps as we get into this weekend and then the rest of the week. And hey, if you like what you've seen so far on Horse Sense, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to the Xpressbet YouTube channel as we get into Derby week, so you don't miss out on any of the content that we're putting out. Make sure that you check out the promotions tab on the Xpressbet website for a full list of all of our promotions this weekend. And don't forget to load up your first bet account before the races get underway on Saturday.